Words of reflection this morning are by Leslie Huvafales. All that we have been, all that we will become. All that we have been separately and all that we will become together is stretched out before and behind us like stars scattered across a canvas of sky. We stand at the precipice, arms locked, together like tandem skydivers, working up the courage to jump. Tell me, friends, what have you got to lose? Our fear of failure? Our mistrust of our own talents? What have we got to lose? A poverty of spirit? The lie that we are alone? What wonders await us in the space between the first leap and the moment our feet, our wheels, however we move our bodies across this precious earth, touch down softly on unknown soil? What have we got to lose that we can't replace with some previously unimaginable joy? Please remain seated, and we will sing hymn number 396, I Know This Rose Will Open.
So how many of you had a mom who every once in a while said, "Be quiet, I can't hear myself think"? I see some hands. I thought about that after I wrote this whole sermon, so I had to put it out there for you, because when I finished the sermon, I thought, my mom said this whole thing in those few short words. In reinventing the church, David and Beverly Bombau, who were at Meadville Lombard when I was there, he was a professor and they're both ministers, they wrote, "The church exists to proclaim the gospel that each human being is infinitely precious, that the meaning of our lives lies hidden in our interactions with each other. The challenge we confront is to be a church that does not bury the great truth beneath all our business or busyness, but which enables us to encounter each other with wonder, appreciation, and expectation, to call out of each other strength and wisdom and compassion we never knew we had." So you might have read in the newsletter that I'm trying to do something here that I think will be valuable and important. And it's not something entirely new, but maybe a new way to do something that you've done before. It might or it might not work as I'm imagining it to work. Sometimes you just have to try something and see what happens. And to do it will require a commitment from all of us to try to make it work. And folks, after all I've seen and heard over the last week, and I'm sure many of you also, I'm more convinced than ever that we have to do whatever we can to continue to build a strong, healthy church here, like it is now, so that we can support one another as a voice for reason and tolerance in the world, a voice that is so desperately needed. Our message, as Bill pointed out, so much needed. the message of compassion and justice, appreciation for diversity, and the knowledge that no one person has a corner on the truth. The answers are at the heart of a community that learns to listen to one another and to the inner teacher in each of us. There's a lot of research going on all the time about what people want and need from a church. And often what we want and need are not exactly the same things. I don't know about you, but sometimes I want things that I probably don't need. And certainly when we're raising children, we have no problem determining that what they want might not necessarily be in their best interest in the long run. Somehow, though, it's a little more difficult to discipline ourselves. At least, that's my opinion. For a long time, religious institutions were a major part of American society. At one point, though, 1 in 4 members of the generation born after 1980 were unaffiliated with any particular faith. And I think it gets more and more with each new generation. Still, the people are coming to our doors, often longing for something they can't describe. And they come with no predetermined expectation of what will happen when they get here. In the second of the webinars that some of us are watching about churches, they were talking about people come to church to find a way to make meaning and to make a difference. I think that's probably always been the case. I remember back in the 60s, I wasn't reading then, but, you know. And when I look in the closets of our churches, I see that back in the 60s, we had a curriculum called Man, the Meaning Maker. Now, you can imagine a number of reasons why they don't have that anymore, the first being that it said man is the meaning maker. But even back then, we were aware that people were coming to church and wanted to make meaning. Something else that we know about people is that they come looking for connection. And not just connection to other people, but connection to their or our own deeper selves. And the difference we want to make is not just in the larger world, it's also often in our own lives. It's up to us, the people who are the church, to be clear about who we are and what we're doing and why. Then when people come to us, we can invite them to connect with the community that will help them make meaning of their lives and make a difference. We can respond with a shared ministry that helps each of us live lives of integrity, grounded in our own identity. That response makes us a ministry of responsibility. On the surface, this might sound pretty simple. Create lots of activities and entry points for people to connect with one another and find them something useful and meaningful to do. The truth is, if it was that simple, there would not be so many people struggling to figure out how to live from their most authentic selves in meaningful ways. Long time ago, over 20 years ago, the Quaker theologian, author, and educator Parker Palmer was the presenter for a conference in Madison, Wisconsin that annually drew a large assembly of Unitarian Universalist ministers and professional religious educators. At that time, Parker Palmer had been working for a few years developing circles of trust. And he was introducing us to this idea and leading us through some of what it would feel like to be a part of a circle of trust. He designed this process to help teachers who were losing heart because of all the obstacles and regulations blocking them from teaching from their own authentic knowing. I think any of you who are school teachers in here probably understand that. I think it's only gotten worse from what I hear from my friends who are teachers. And so he was also working on a book, The Courage to Teach, which built on the premise that good teaching cannot be reduced to technique. Good teaching comes from the identity and integrity of the teacher. Today, there's a 20th anniversary edition of that book that he was working on then, and Palmer has since created the Center for Courage and Renewal with the mission to create a more just, compassionate, and healthy world by nurturing personal and professional integrity and the courage to act on it. In the last quarter of a century, tens of thousands of people have participated, and hundreds have been trained to lead and facilitate the thousands of programs that center offers. And the programs reach beyond teachers, as you can imagine, and are now directed to people in a wide range of professions because, as their website states, distrust, stress, isolation, and burnout are robbing society of what's possible when people bring integrity and humanity to the places where they live and work. Many years later, are we not seeing this? What might our country look like if all our leaders were bringing integrity and humanity to where they live and work? So our theme this month is integrity. And two definitions I found: the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, a moral uprightness. Also, the state of being whole and undivided. What Parker Palmer aspired to do through his Center for Courage and Renewal and Circles of Trust is to help people find wholeness so they could stop living what he called divided lives. What I learned at that conference made a huge difference in my life and in my ministry, and I've thought about it in light of the work that we do as churches to create community where we nurture one another in our individual spiritual journeys, one of our tenets of Unitarian Universalism. I've also thought about it in relation to the ways that we are with one another in our small groups, whether those groups are for the express purpose of religious growth and learning, or debate, or support for one another in our congregations, like our committees, boards. All of these are small groups to which we belong. And different types of groups have different goals. But one thing that I believe this church strives to be is a place that allows a person to show up and feel safe being who they truly are. Those were the words in our welcome this morning. We want to make sure people feel welcome to come as who they are. And yet, even with that invitation, how easy is it to show up and be who we really are everywhere we go? Not so easy, I don't think. Discovering our true self is even hard, perhaps some of the hardest work we do. And for some people, I don't think it ever happens. What is that phrase we use about our young people when they've reached an age where we think that they should be living the life that we planned for them? What do we say? Oh, they're trying to find themselves. And yet that can go on for a lifetime. Depending on how many layers of stuff exist between the face we present to the world and the face that is really ours, it may take a lifetime, if ever, for people to truly find themselves. And even when we find ourselves, there may only be a few places we're willing to show up as we truly are. Too often the feedback we get, whether it's verbal or body language, that feedback we get when we allow ourselves to be who we really are, and therefore vulnerable in the presence of others, can be way too threatening to our sense of safety or sense of selfhood. In the years that he's been creating Circles of Trust, Parker Palmer has seen some amazing examples of people finding their true selves and being able to live lives that are no longer divided. But this doesn't happen on anybody's timeline. And it doesn't happen when people are coerced. And it also doesn't happen in the presence of those who think they know how to fix, save, advise, or set other people straight. In fact, that's an important rule of the Circle of Trust. No fixing, saving, advising, or setting straight. And you know what? That's a hard rule to follow. Even when you know it's the right thing. And I don't know about the rest of you who are or have been parents, but I know for me it was nearly impossible to keep my mouth shut when my kids were about to do something that I thought would bring unwanted consequences. Fixing, saving, advising, and setting straight can be second nature to us. So Parker Palmer thinks about it with this question. How do we create an environment that welcomes the shy soul? Not the shy person, but the shy soul. And soul is one of those words that sometimes needs a little clarification in a Unitarian Universalist context. I think of it as the core of who I am, something I cannot put my finger on, but I know it's there. Buddhists call it original nature or big self. Quakers call it the inner light or the inner teacher. Hasidic Jews call it the spark of the divine. Humanists call it identity and integrity. What we call it is not so important, but it is important to be able to speak about it because, as Parker Palmer explains, it is the objective ontological reality of selfhood that keeps us from reducing ourselves or each other to biological mechanisms, psychological projections, sociological constructs, or raw material to be manufactured into whatever society needs. All of these diminishments of our humanity that constantly threaten the quality of our lives. We know a lot about how to welcome the intellect, especially we UUs, places where we can think logically and analyze reality. Universities are great at that. We know how to make space for the emotions, places where we celebrate joy and express anger, places that help us better understand our emotions. Different kinds of therapy are helpful for that. We know how to create spaces that invite the will to show up, to get a job done. It's called a committee or a task force. We're great at that. And we know about spaces that allow the ego to show up, to groom itself and strut a bit. Probably in this church, in this community, you can think about ways we make space for all of those different parts of ourselves. And all of these parts are important. We would not want to separate different aspects of ourselves and leave some of them home. Yet to bring the whole self in, like the hokey pokey, there needs to be a way to invite the soul to feel at home. In Palmer's experience with circles of trust, he's discovered that when the soul shows up, the will, the intellect, the emotions, and the ego are transformed. In the words of one theologian, we can think with the mind descended into the heart. The soul, he explains, is like a wild animal. That means it's tough, resilient, smart. It knows how to survive in hard places where nothing else knows how to survive. Just like the wild animal can survive in the winter, in the deep woods, with hardly anything to eat. And he compares this to a time in his life when he suffered from a severe clinical depression. Winter, deep woods, nothing to eat, and everything he counted on failed him. His intellect was in shambles, his emotions were dead, his will was gone, and his ego was shattered. He had such a negative sense of himself that it led to self-destructive ideation. And I know personally that he's been through this at least 3 times in his life. But somewhere, way back in the woods, he could sense the presence of this wild thing that knew how to survive. Not often, but enough to think there was something in him that wanted to live. Maybe he thought, I can get a little closer in touch with that. On the other hand, just like a wild animal, the soul is essentially shy. If you want to see a wild animal, the last thing you do is run crashing into the woods, yelling at the animal to show itself. And yet, that is exactly what we do sometimes in small groups. Okay, spill your guts. You'll feel better if you talk about it. Come on, let's get those deeply guarded secrets out. Let's get real with one another. There used to be circles like that a lot. In the 60s, I'm told. You know the game Truth or Dare? It's kind of like that, right? You get a choice. The person who's it says, okay, truth or dare. And you either answer whatever embarrassing question they ask you truthfully, or you take the dare, which will be equally embarrassing, probably, and fun for the people who get to watch. I don't know about playing that game. I don't know whether it takes courage or a desperate need to belong, but in either case, I've never played. What do you do if you see a wild animal? You walk quietly into the woods, sit at the base of a tree, breathe with the tree, and maybe the wild thing you want to see will make an appearance. You may only catch it out of the corner of your eye, but that's enough. You won't be able to ask it to pose for a picture. You won't try to harness it to get a job done for you. Being in a circle of trust is like walking into the woods, sitting quietly, breathing with the tree and the earth, waiting for the soul to show up, and not trying to manipulate it once it does. Now, these circles of trust that Parker Palmer developed with his center are quarterly gatherings, retreats of people who sign on for 2 years. And the facilitators are chosen from a pool of applicants, and then they're trained over 2 years. Because the facilitators have to discipline themselves to do this work, to hold the space for the soul to show up. And Palmer is deeply invested in the quality of the experience of the people who entrust themselves to his groups. He feels personally responsible, and I think that what he and his center are doing is amazing. And I'm not suggesting that we try anything of that level here. However, what Parker Palmer taught many of us at that retreat that year had a huge influence on how we developed our small groups in our congregations, sometimes called small group ministry or covenant groups. You've had chalice circles here. There have been a number of models and different names. And I remember how excited I was when I came back from that conference all those many years ago. And I wanted to tell a congregation all about that. And I was really met with a lot of resistance and confusion. And I heard every reason why it wouldn't work. But I'm a persistent person. And eventually we had those small groups. Some of them devolved into discussion groups, so well-loved in many of our congregations, and eventually fell apart, or they ended up in the coffee shop somewhere, because the facilitators have to be able to hold the space. And it's not for everyone, you know? You have to commit to it. You have to want to do it. In 2011, I attended a week-long workshop led by another minister who was instrumental in designing and implementing a program that he created for our congregations around themes, which is what we're using for our theme for the month now. There was a group of about 35 of us who spent a week learning about this program that he was developing, and we all signed on to help contribute to the packets. And so every month we get a packet of information, but that 35 people has turned to at least 200 of our UU congregations are doing this, and maybe more by now. I think every year more people sign on. You've heard a little bit about it. We use a theme every month. There's a packet for worship. There's a packet for RE. They're using it for the curriculum and things that they do in religious education. And then there's a small group packet. So I immediately recognized the influence of Parker Palmer in that program. And my experience in over 2 years of leading these groups convinced me that the material provided and the guidelines for interaction created the space that we need for us to hear ourselves think. And so I want to invite you in to participation in this idea of creating small groups. I think I called them theme circles. I don't know exactly when they'll meet. I just thought, well, we'll try it out for the Sundays that are in the on the calendar. The next 2 Sundays in February and 2 Sundays in March. I don't have any official sign-up materials here, but you can send an email, call Tara at the office, or send her an email is better. Call me. You have my number, I think, somewhere on the order of service. Just let me know, because I'm going to show up those 2 Sundays in February. I'm going to recruit some extra people to facilitate. If you think you'd like to be a facilitator, if you think you're somebody who can hold the space, which means hold your tongue a lot of times, and help people commit to the process of no fixing, saving, setting straight. We let people speak. We go around the room. We let people speak the first time uninterrupted. It's really not even important. It's not important that you agree with them. It's not even important that you understand exactly what they're saying. What's important is that you hold the space so if I'm talking, I can hear myself think. And honestly, that's a rare thing in Unitarian Universalist congregations. We love to talk. We love to share our opinion, and we like to tell people what we think about what they said. So it's a spiritual discipline to listen. But don't you wish the world was listening a little better right now? So let me know. I might walk around with a clipboard after church if you want me to write your name down or whatever. But I'd love to see us do that. I think it changes cultures. I think it changes the quality of relationships within a church. So I thought I'd give it a try. Our closing song is a song of peace for the earth. And I thought, as Parker Palmer is a Quaker, and Quakers are all about peace, we would sing this in honor of the peaceful way that we want to live our lives. Number 163, and please rise as your body or spirit allow. These are words from The Journey by Mary Oliver. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own. Go in peace.